What's up, skeptics? Thomas Westbrook here. On Holy Kool-Aid, I talk a lot about science and religion, but I rarely share much of my story and personal background. In my last video, I did talk about how the missionary to the Sentinelese Island who was killed could have easily been me. In this video, I'm going to share with you just how intense my religious upbringing as a missionary kid was, the extent of my indoctrination, and tell you one thing that if you're a Christian, you should never say to an atheist. My lineage on both sides is Christian as far back as I can trace it. My parents both got involved in missions right out of college and dedicated their lives to spreading their religion. They met and fell in love at a missionary base in Texas before moving to California, where my dad completed his master's, and that's when I popped into the picture. Born in Los Angeles, I was a home birth, but was dedicated to God in the church almost as soon as I was healthy enough to leave the house. When I was just 3 years old, my parents sold or donated most of their belongings and moved our whole family to a former Soviet country less than 2 years after the collapse of the USSR. To give you an idea just how intense it was, they brought with them a book called Where There Is No Doctor, a guide to DIY emergency field medicine in the absence of medical facilities. Every weekday morning, for as far back as I can remember, my siblings and I would study the Bible together in morning family devotionals. On top of that, we had church on Sunday morning. We never missed a service. In the early days, we had home fellowships, singing songs, praying, and reading scriptures with other missionary families, but eventually when I got older, there was an international church that I started attending. To be a Westbrook was to be Christian. That was very much a part of our family identity, and it was an identity that I cherished. When I was 6, I wanted more than anything to be baptized. I was terrified of hell, and I wanted to be like the rest of my family. I remember going to the Caspian Sea on an exceptionally cold day, wanting to be baptized more than anything in the world. My older sister did, and shot out of the icy water like a rocket. But being a scrawny little 6-year-old kid, I was too freezing to do what I had intended. I sat in the sand, hugged my knees, shivering under a towel, and literally sobbed my eyes out because I felt like I had let God and my family down. A few months later, at age 7, I got another chance. Several of the locals wanted to convert and be baptized, but had to do so covertly. So we had a baptism ceremony in our apartment bathtub, and I got to be baptized too. I finally felt like a true Christian and a true member of the family. Now, I don't want to imply that I was like so sheltered that all we read was the Bible while sitting around waiting for the second coming. Technically, the first book that I read for myself was a kid's version of The Jungle Book, and the first thing I remember memorizing was Shakespeare. The missionary kid community put on plays, and I was the little thumb-biting provocateur at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet. And I also watched Disney movies and played enough video games to the point where I can totally kick Telltale Atheists and GM Skeptics' butts in Super Smash Bros. Certain aspects of my education were amazing. I studied logic, Greek and Latin, classic literature, history, math, etc. But other aspects of my education were abysmal, having science textbooks that denied evolution and taught instead that the Bible is literal and the earth is roughly 6,000 years old.
From a scientific point of view, I don't think it's reasonable to believe in macroevolution.
Religion wasn't all that we studied, but there was a lot of it. We watched cartoon Jesus stories, had Bible coloring books, Bible trivia games, Bible toys, Adventures in Odyssey, Veggie Tales. I memorized the entire Sermon on the Mount by the age of 12, plus loads of other verses and chapters. Heck, even the first puzzle I remember doing was of Noah's Ark. To me, faith was everything. I was completely sold out for God. I remember watching a Christian movie about the Columbine shooting that claimed that Cassie Bernal had died for her faith, and thinking as a child what an honor it would be to be martyred for God. I made up my mind on the spot that if it came to that, that's the way that I would go. I wondered why more people didn't die like that if the world hated Christians so much, and thought that maybe I was the only true Christian. Aside from Cassie Bernal, of course, but she was dead now. When I was 12, I put together and led a youth group for kids my age, teaching them about the importance of faith, until an actual adult youth pastor came along and set up a group for junior high and high school kids. That was my social circle, and I craved those social interactions. So when my parents would ground me, they would literally ground me from youth group. I read extensively about the lives of famous missionaries, as well as countless books on apologetics, church history, Bible study books, and prayer guides. So on a side note, Christians, before you try to pass me off on brilliant Christian thinkers, yes, I've read Mere Christianity and the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, and I'm quite familiar with Ravi Zacharias. Now, I wasn't allowed to watch most R-rated movies, although Passion of the Christ was okay, and I missed out on most of the music and TV shows of the 90s, and I'm still kind of playing catch up. But the odd flip side to all of this is that I started going to soccer practice at age 10 and would ride the bus across town alone in a city of several million multiple times a week at that age. I spoke the language fluently and had traveled to countries most Americans couldn't find on the map, let alone properly pronounce. So in a way, I was simultaneously the most and least sheltered kid compared to most of my friends back home. Every month, our missions organization would have a Sunday evening potluck with prayer and worship, and once a year we would have a really big week-long conference filled with sermons, prayer, worship, and Bible studies. There were even lessons in prophecy for us kids. Like just about every kid, I got bored at times, sure, but my faith was sincere, and I loved and admired Jesus. I wholeheartedly believed that he was the Son of God who died and was resurrected for my sins, and I accepted his sacrifice. And I never thought to question the veracity of any of it. Yes, I had questions and sometimes was told that God worked in mysterious ways, but it wasn't until I got older that bothered me. I was the faith of a child incarnate. When we would worship, I would feel the Holy Spirit, an intense feeling of warmth and belonging. I would feel shivers and goosebumps run down my back. I would break out into intense laughter and sometimes cry uncontrollably. It was extremely emotional. In retrospect, I now understand more about collective effervescence and the mass hysteria and adrenaline rushes that are not unique to Christianity. But at the time, I thought 100% that it was proof of God, and told my atheist friends that I knew God was real because I had experienced him and knew that what I felt was real. What I was feeling fit perfectly with the descriptions that every other Christian gave me for what it was like to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And it happened to me under the same circumstances as them. I graduated high school a year early and attended a Christian university. Actually, it's the same one that Drew of GM Skeptic went to. I was there for a year before transferring to a public one. Over the course of the next several years, I went all out for God. I worked at a church camp 2 summers leading kids to Christ. I joined a Christian fraternity, continued studying my Bible regularly, started writing praise and worship songs. I volunteered as a youth pastor and worship leader in my aunt's church one summer, attended religious revival meetings where there was faith healing, prophecy, and speaking in tongues. Yes, I experienced all of that firsthand, although it wasn't until I became an atheist that I realized exactly what was going on. I even spent a semester as a missionary in the Muslim world. I didn't leave my faith because I wanted to sin. I didn't leave because anything traumatic happened to me. And I'm not going through some kind of a phase. I actually had extremely supportive and loving parents who were kind and patient and never physically or emotionally abused me. They very rarely even raised their voice and are still happily married. I always had a roof over my head, a clean bed, and plenty to eat. I had every reason to stay a Christian. I left my faith because I started digging deeper from the perspective that truth withstands scrutiny. The Bible didn't withstand scrutiny, so I concluded that it must not be entirely true. I didn't choose to stop believing any more than you can choose to believe that your phone is a banana. You can lie, but you know better. And I dare you to eat your phone. So if you're a Christian and I sent you this video, know that before you try to preach to me or try to convert me or even just debate me, know that I was probably in this a hell of a lot deeper than you are. And while I don't have a degree in philosophy or theology, I do know my Bible. I know the history and the context, and I know the church and Christianity inside and out because I've literally been both. When you tell an ex-Christian atheist that they were never a real believer, it's freaking insulting. Like negating part of someone's identity and telling them that they're a poser. It's a no true Scotsman fallacy, and I literally get angry when people tell me that. It's like telling someone who wholeheartedly worked at a company that they believed in for 20 years before realizing that the company had serious ethical issues and quitting, that they were never a real employee. It's an extremely presumptuous and rude statement to make. So don't say that to an atheist. Talk to them about the truth or merits of your claims and explore them together. You might learn something too. Don't talk down to them or negate their experience. Because lots of us atheists come from deeply religious or spiritual backgrounds and left our faith after exploring it thoroughly. Oh, and if you're an atheist in that position, you're not alone. There's a community here for you. If any of you can relate to my story at all and you like what I'm doing with Holy Koolaid, destigmatizing atheism and spreading a love of science, I just moved to Austin and I'm setting up a home studio, but I could use your help. I pour just about everything I have into my work. Like, I literally have been spending all my spare money on Holy Koolaid stuff, even though my apartment's pretty bare right now and I don't even have a real bed yet. So if you'd like to help me out in the spirit of the holidays, you can sponsor my videos at patreon.com/holykoolaid for as little as $1 a video. That's like a cup of coffee a month. You guys rock. Dare to be curious and don't drink the Kool-Aid.